You could check progress to see what they're doing. Well, up to, what else could you do with a reading conference?
An assessment?
Yeah, which is kind of like checking progress. It can be in a form of assessment. What else could a reading conference be?
Seeing what they're stuck on, what they have trouble with.
Yeah, it's goal setting if they're stuck on something, helping them out. Yeah, build confidence as a reader. Most importantly, forget about the assessments, forget about the skills and the strategies and all this junk I'm going to talk about in the next 15 to 20 minutes. Most importantly, conferring is a conversation between you and a reader. And you want to get to know your student. Who are they as a reader? What do they love to read about? Do they have other interests in life that maybe you can steer them towards new kinds of reading? It's truly about a conversation between a person who is modeling a love for reading, and hopefully does have a love for reading, with someone who you want to develop into a reader. And I do mean it's a conversation. It is not, you're not talking to or at a student. Because let's think about what confer means. You deliberate, you consult, you compare, you chat. It's a conversation, a conference. What a conversation is not, a reading conference is not a script. A reading conference is not a script. There is no plan that you can go into. Every reading conference should be as different as every reader. There is no scripted way to do a reading conference. Yes, ma'am?
I know I ask you this all the time. What was the definition? I missed half of it.
It was just a kind of an activating definition. To confer,
Yeah.
meet in order to deliberate together or compare views, consult. Yeah, you in no way need to know it. I was just kind of using it as a conversation sparker. That's why I like using images in my PowerPoints, because you guys can't tell me to stop and go back to them so you can write them down. What else is a reading conference not? A reading conference is not a one-way conversation. It is a conversation between two parties. And as Mr. Anderson put it, the purpose is to look at meaningful interactions that support readers' ability to process a text with both understanding and fluency. Right? That's your overall goal, to improve their reading. And who can remind you the definition of fluency? I know some of you have taken 301 or 318. I know some of you were in my 301 and 318. So you should know the definition of fluency. Is fluency decoding? Is fluency comprehension? What's fluency? Now let me introduce you to the concept of proper wait time. Definition of fluency, please. It's not in your notes. You guys all have these little computer thingies in your pocket. So you probably find it. Some of you have little computer thingies on your desk. You can check that interwebby thing. It's okay. It is a concept that we really introduced in the foundations of reading.
Is to read smooth and quickly and to thoroughly understand what you're reading?
All right, well, you can be fluent and not understand, but you do have two things correctly. The speed and the smoothness. It's not the most scientific definition, but you're on the right track. You're very close. Who can help her out?
Speak or write easily or accurately.
Yeah, you're looking for speed, accuracy, and last component? And expression, yes. So that smoothness that you're talking about. He's smooth. Yeah, so those are the three components of fluency. Notice that is different than understanding. You do have to decode to be fluent. But decoding isn't the only definition of fluency. Now, understanding, that's the kit caboodle, that's comprehension, that's meaning making. And that's where the conference can come in a lot to support students. So when you're looking at reading conferences, it's supposed to be a meaningful interaction to help build students' understanding and fluency with text. Tips for reading conferences. First, right there, you do not do all of the talking. It is not a teacher-dominated. Think about Charlie Brown. Wah, 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 wah. It is not that kind of conversation. You need to listen to your students. You need to listen to them. You should have at least a 50-50 matchup in student-to-teacher talk during reading conferences. You also need to develop a good assessment system to keep records. Often this is a notebook of each reader, of a log of what their goal was and what they should be working towards. And that brings us to goal setting. You should set goals with your students. What should they, as a reader, be working on? Think about back to our buddy Rick and that student who was doing the double L consonant short vowel sound rule. Or the other students whose goal was to really drive off that mini lesson of character analysis and thinking about characters. Every time Rick talked to a student, he had a goal in mind for each one of those students. You should question the students, not interrogate. I'm not thinking like, Miami Vice, light shining down on, you guys probably, there's a Miami Vice movie. You might have a reference to that. Not the TV show. But there might be a light, we're not talking about police interrogations, okay? But questioning the fact that you want to draw out information from the students. And there's multiple kinds of conferences, probably more than the list I've put here. We're going to go a little text heavy as I ran out of time this morning to find images for all the words that I wanted. First, you can get to know a student as a reader for your conferences. What are their likes? What drives them? What is their passion? We need to get back to interest-driven learning in our school systems. And you can do that through Reader's Workshop. And you can match a student with a book, not based on their reading level per se, but on their interest level. Motivation is so key to student performance in reading that I would take a motivated reader using above grade level text than an unmotivated reader using at level or below level text. Learn about the reading process. This is probably the most common conferences. We'll talk about this. This is where we're actually teaching students about how to read. Evaluative conferences, maybe you're meeting them to do a running record. And a taking action conference for some of our more proficient readers who don't need help in strategy instruction because they can already summarize, they can already connect. How do you meet the needs of those students? So this is a way to differentiate for some of our more talented students who we often forget about when we're thinking about differentiation. You can work with them during reading conferences to draw them into the text in ways that you don't need to do with your students who have to focus in on, say, decoding, or have to focus in on their fluency. So the Getting to Know You conference. Often at the beginning of the year, a lot of teachers develop kind of a reading survey and give it to the students. What do you like to read about? What was the last book you read? What are your favorite hobbies? Do you have any favorite authors? Do you have favorite genres? What's your favorite book of all time? What's your favorite TV show? What's your favorite sport? These are all things, and you can put that in your record because you can connect to the student through their interests. Not just matching titles, but you can use like metaphors. So if you know that hockey is their favorite sport, you could say, oh, well, think about looking for the main idea, like charging the net. Something, it helps to know your students. It also helps the students to learn the routine of the reading conference, the Getting to Know You conference at the beginning of the year. You might want to meet with the students and say, hi, welcome, my name's Dr. McVeary, or Mr. Mack is my teacher, because that's when I was a student or a teacher. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we do Reader's Workshop. And I'm going to talk to you about the Reader's Conference. So tell me, have you ever done this in the past? What's it like to meet? What do you want to work on as a reader? What are your goals this year as a reader? You could give them a short piece to read and quickly determine who are the fluent readers in your class. Because as elementary or early childhood education teachers, that's a key delineation, a very important one. You'll have different goals for your fluent readers who are fluent at a specific benchmark grade level and those that are not. So you need to determine that early. And that can be determined during the Get to Know You conference. For young and emergent readers, looking at you 308 early childhood teachers, you can do this Get to Know You conference survey orally. And talk about them. How much do they read at home? Do they, maybe you give them a book and you're looking at how well they do the concepts, know their concepts about print. Now, the reading process. This is the most common form of your reading conferences. This is your teaching moments. This is when you're meeting with students this is what we saw Rick do in the videos. This is what we're going to evaluate today. They're usually based on student goals, but more often than not, they're connected to the mini lesson. What you're teaching. Think about Rick's mini lesson. We saw him go over how to do character analysis. And he used that picture book of grandma learning to read. Then the students went back and they were reading I think they had a shared text because it seemed they're all reading the same story. Was it the Ramona book or it was some book. You were always talking about Ramona, right? So then they went back and he met with students and he talked about that mini lesson. However, he also met with some students who weren't his fluent readers and had them working on other things, such as decoding. And we'll talk about this, but some of the most common strategies that we teach, these are comprehension strategies. And I've talked to you about the differences between a skill and a strategy. Skills happen automatically, right? There's a speed and automaticity to them. For you folks, decoding is a skill. You don't have to think about it. You look at words and it just happens. Strategies, on the other hand, require deliberate, actionable goals and goal setting as you read. We know that good readers are strategic readers. So that's why we often do mini lessons or provide students with reading conferences to teach them things such as how to predict, clarify, question, summarize, visualize, connect, determine cause and effect, analyze author's craft, interpret meaning. Anything that we know that good readers do, you could oftenly do during a reading process conference with the student. Maybe you focus and analyze text structures. Maybe you teach them annotation. This is where the bulk of your one-on-one instruction happens in a reading classroom. This and guided reading. And you'll learn more about how to do guided reading in 301 and 318. Or for you folks, 305 and 306 actually now. The evaluative conference, I was tempted to not even put it in. Oh, did you need me to go back?
No,
I was tempted to not even put this in with the conferences because it violates my principles of conversation. Because you're often using it to judge students. And it also violates every time you're working with a student, you're kind of evaluating the reading skills based on their individualized goals. But we often talk about it. The evaluative conference is used to monitor student progress. Often you might be doing this because this happens quite often, and this is why I put it in there. When students are doing their independent interactive reading time. So it's independent interactive reading, I2R. You often are doing running records with your students. Or you're administrating the DRA2. Or you're doing some other in the big bin of reading assessments that you will be required to administer. Yes, ma'am.
So even in 318, you mentioned like running record, but what exactly is it? You never like said exactly.
Because we're going to spend about 3 weeks on how to do running records. It's basically you give a kid a book, and it's called miscue analysis, where you're looking at do they say the word correctly or incorrectly, and you count down the number that you take the number of words they got correct, number of words they got incorrect versus the number of words they got correct, the amount of time that they had. You come up with a formula, then you analyze their miscues and try to determine where they're making their mistakes. Are they semantic mistakes, syntactic mistakes, etc.? It's too much to do for right now. We're literally going to spend about 2 weeks on it in 318. Because you have to leave knowing how to properly administer running records. But often you do that while your kids are doing their independent interactive reading. So hold off on that for the other class. And finally, you can maybe determine and evaluate what strategies work for students. What of those things in the mini lessons have they done well? What do they need to continue to work on? Now, the Taking Action Conference. This is for your more skilled readers. What do we know about strategy instruction? Well, we know it has a strong effect, an effect size really, it has a strong effect size for students who are below or at grade level. It has a much weaker effect size for our skilled readers. Why is that? Why would strategy instruction not have a great impact on skilled readers? Right? It doesn't change their scores at all.
They're not being challenged.
Yeah, because they're already proficient. They're not being challenged. They already question, predict, clarify, summarize, infer. They do this stuff already. So by forcing them to redo it, you're basically A, wasting their time, or B, not challenging them so they just get it done fast. So as teachers, you need to come up with creative ways to extend kids into texts when they're above grade level. And one way to do that is to have them think about what they've taken into the text. Connect it to social issues. Have them reflect about how they feel. Or you all folks, many of you in your Glockster assignments talking about who you are as a reader and writer, talked about the escapism in stories. About how you had empathy for the characters. Or how you evaluated the theme. That's what you can do with proficient readers. Have them look at the theme. Or have them delve deep into author's craft. And think about, why did the author make specific text moves? Why did the author use this word? What is the author trying to accomplish? So it just doesn't have to be these outside connections. You can still do these kinds of proficient reading conferences, driving students back into the text. I was thinking, I watched a new comedy last night. Thought it was going to be great. It was Andy Sternberg, that 99 Precinct. Did anybody see it? Spoiler alert, it's awful. The jokes are contrived, predictable, and it just wasn't a smart comedy. Goldberg, on the other hand, while some of the 80s references were a little off, I just don't take that kid as being in the Public Enemy. The timeline's a little off. Smarter comedy, but not my point. In this cop, Andy Samberg's desk, was a mouse. Its name was Algernon. That kind of struck me, and it hit me, and it reminded me of probably the one short story. I was in 7th grade that probably affected me the most. Anybody know the story at all? Flowers for Algernon, yeah. It is one of those pieces that has stuck with me since the moment I read it. And that's what you're trying to get at. Not that I was a proficient reader, it just happens to be. It was just one of those kind of intertextual accidents that just happened right before class. So I was like, you know what? I need to remember this. But that story shaped me, and I don't know if anybody's truly familiar with it, but they come up with there was Charlie, I'm not going to remember all the details perfectly, who had, I think, some mental disabilities, and they came up with some kind of medicine. And they first gave to this mouse called Algernon, if I'm remembering this correctly. And the mouse became very, very smart. And then they gave to Charlie, and it had the same effect. But unfortunately for Charlie, he was still very smart when he saw the effects wearing off on the mouse. And he knew that was in his future. And it was kind of left you with this big question. Was it just what happened to him? Would he have been better off in ignorance? Not knowing what it was like? So I could be off. I mean, I haven't read the story in 30 years. No, 25. I'm not that old. But it stuck with me, and that's something you want to find. Those parts of the reading with these students. These are students that already love to read. Students who read outside of class on their own. So you want to find the parts of the story that stick with them. You want them in 25 years later talking about a story. Just like you folks did in your Glocksters. The stories that actually kind of changed their lives and shaped who they are and who they want to be. That's what you do with the taking action stories. Okay, so what we're going to do now is look at a couple reading conferences, and we'll discuss them.
test sent out.
Okay. And do you know what your job is today during Reader's Workshop? What are you looking for?
Text-to-text connections.
Okay, so when you find a text connection,
What have you noticed so far? Goal setting, right off the bat. What are you reading for? What did he say? Yeah, text connections. What else do we notice? Look at this picture. Yeah, she's a notebook. What is she doing with the notebook? Yes, she's tracking student progress. It's her simple record-keeping system.
what I want you to do.
We're sticking notes on the page of learners.
Perfect. Can I hear you read out loud to me?
Sure. Read it, step down. The rabbit was standing in a ray of sunlight, and he saw them he took off. Jack and Annie followed the rabbit until he vanished behind the tallest tree. I told you, see, said Annie, panting. She pointed up at the tree. Look at me, Faye was waving to them from the magic tree outside of the branches. Jack and Annie waved back to her. As always, Jack was very happy to see the enchantress library again. Come on up, she called.
Let me stop you for a moment. Enchantress. Do you know what that word means?
Like sort of enchanted, like it's
What does enchanted mean?
sort of like a magic spell or something.
And what clues told you what that word meant when you read it? How did you know the meaning of that word? What helped you?
The just word enchanted just helped me. So
So you knew what the word enchanted
Yeah.
was, and so
and
that helped you.
enchantress is like a female magician, I think.
So
And then has librarian.
when you're reading and when you come across words that you're not really sure what the meaning is, what do you do to help yourself as a reader? You stop and
Infer?
you can infer.
Is she on her original goal? Bad or good? What do you think? Still good? Why?
Well, like Rick was doing other video, he had like a goal for everyone, but when another,
Yeah, just like what Rick had a goal for everyone, but another what?
like another task, I guess, or another,
Yeah, a time for just-in-time teaching.
yeah.
So he came up with this word enchantress, and she's like, you know what? Let's talk about how we infer meaning right now.
Definitely. Let's go ahead and keep on reading. Or you can keep on reading.
Annie and Jack started up the rope ladder. They climbed up to the treehouse. We followed a strange rabbit here, said Annie. Is he your friend? Yeah, said Morgan. He smiled mysteriously.
Good.
I have many odd friends. Look at now, said Annie. Look at now. That's right. How are you, said Jack. I'm starting problems with your life, said the enchantress. Which leaves me little time to do my real work. But soon you both will become master librarians, and that will be a big help to me.
I'm going to stop you there. I have a couple of questions to ask you. The page that you just read out loud to me, what was that most, well, the part of this one, and then page 3. What was going on? What was
the Jack and Annie just followed a rabbit, one of
What is she evaluating right now?
friends, and they went to the magic treehouse.
Yeah, can he summarize his comprehension?
Figure out how she's still having problems with Merlin.
His recalling of the text.
And so, do you have any predictions at this time about the rabbit? Do you think the rabbit is magical?
Yeah, I predict that.
What did she just do? Yeah, well, she just sort of, because his goal is text-to-text connection. So she didn't do that, but I think I don't think what just happened was positive. Think about what just happened. Mm-hmm.
By asking if he thought the rabbit was magical, she like put an idea.
Yeah, she gave him the answer that she's looking for. This is where I talk about how you need to listen to your students. It's okay. I mean, she's an amazing teacher. And no reading conference will ever be perfect. But I agree with you. I think that she kind of gave him the prediction. Now we can either say, no, he's not going to be magical, or yes, he is going to be magical. Instead of letting him that wait time and letting him work through the idea.
Once you get into the treehouse and go to a ghost town.
Okay. Grant, one thing that I want to compliment you on is that as you're reading, you're doing an excellent job of reading all of the punctuation. For example, when you see quotation marks, you're really reading like the person is actually talking. I want you.
Wait, that's not like I'm going to the sea.
No, you're reading with a lot of expression, and that's what.
See?
Exactly. That's really smart. One thing that I want you to work on while you're doing your independent reading is making sure that you're keeping track of what's going on in the story.
That I understand what's happening.
Exactly. And if something
What did she just do?
makes sense to you while you're reading,
And what stop and refer?
well,
I
actually,
stop and see.
Reread.
Yeah,
stop and reread, and that should help you to understand what's going on. Okay?
So what did he just get? A new goal. His new goal is to practice retelling, and she gave him a fix-up strategy. If you don't know what's going on, stop and reread. We'll do one more, and then I'll let you folks do them in small groups.
You and your table made something about that in the book. It's interesting about the back of the book.
this is the Matthew house and that's the granny.
Do you think that that's actually the granny? Let's go ahead. I noticed that in the back here there's a caption. And the caption says Dawn and Audrey Wood. Do you know who those people are? Yeah, but I noticed that Dawn Wood is the illustrator and Audrey Wood is the author. The author and the illustrator.
What is she reinforcing?
Pretty interesting, huh? Can I kind of
What?
ask you a little bit about that?
Not so much connections. Noticing the author, the title, the which way the book faces. Yeah, concepts about print.
Can you just a little bit louder? I'm noticing something about this book. Are you noticing it too? Tell me what's happening here. Yeah, in each page, you're adding someone new to it. So this book has repeating lines, doesn't it? Where the line.
Repeating lines are great for students working on fluency.
Each new page, they give us a new person to add to the bed. Huh? Keep on reading. Okay. You're doing a really good job reading at a good pace. Something that I want you to notice is you skipped some really important words like on here and a. And that was important because it said on is soup.
So she's kind of evaluating her what here? Her fluency. You're reading at a good pace, but she's skipping words. So she's not reading accurately. Right? She's reading with speed, but not accuracy. Also, what is she also not reading with? Expression. I mean, that could be the result of the camera, but based on her skipping words, I think it's just she's not really a fluent reader.
On a cozy bed. So today, as you're reading, I want you to make sure that you're reading every single word that you see in the book. Because sometimes when we skip words, it changes the whole meaning of the sentence. So it's really important that you read each word. Okay? So tell me what you're going to work on today during your exams and grading.
Reading each word as I see it in the sentence.
She leaves every student with a goal. Notice that. Okay? She's rotating around the room and meeting with students. Sometimes you bring them back to your individual station. Sometimes you rotate like this.
I'm going to go ahead and let you get back to this. And one more thing I have for you is while you're reading today, do you remember what your job is?
All right. So, hold on one second.